Hello and thank you for joining me. In this video, we focus on the Lord's parable of the leaven hid in the meal, and this teaching occurs in Matthew chapter 13 and verse 33. Now, I proceed on the assumption that you have watched the videos in this series that precede this one, and that you have a basic knowledge of what the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is. So I won't go all back over that information right now. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus is illustrating circumstances relative to the operation of his kingdom in the world from his ministry and during the time that we know as the church age. So the church age is the period in history in which the Lord's scriptural assemblies, his churches, function as his kingdom representatives and the executors of his kingdom work. Jesus assigned his kingdom work and responsibilities to his scriptural assemblies, his scriptural churches. In the preceding three parables, the parable of the sower, of the tares hid in the field, or the tares in the field, and the mustard seed, Jesus informed his servants about circumstances that would be adverse to the operation of the kingdom in the world. So his concern was that his kingdom servants not become discouraged, that they not change or leave their assigned message, and that they not retask themselves. In the parable of the mustard seed, the arresting feature, now this is the preceding video, I just want to go back over this a little bit because it sets us up for where we're going in this lesson. In the parable of the mustard seed, the arresting feature is the unnatural growth of the mustard seed. So a man planted a seed in his field that exceeded the bounds of its nature and became something the man did not intend it to be. So the mustard seed, if you recall, became a tree that spread out branches that provided cover for different birds to build their nests in the branches of the tree. So the teaching is, now again we're talking about the parable of the mustard seed, the teaching is that the kingdom of God, as perceived by men, would become perverted into what is today Christendom. Now, Christendom is, we're talking about the entire sphere of all that claims to be Christian. So Christendom provides a cover for all kinds of religious teachings and practices for various denominations. So remember now, going back to the former video, the tree, the great tree, represents the idea of Christendom. Understand that the kingdom of God does not change. So let me give you three things. The kingdom does not change. Number two, the standards of the kingdom do not change. Now, going back to Matthew chapter 5 and verse 3, the chief beatitude, or the way Jesus began the Sermon on the Mount, is he said, blessed, or I like to say spiritually prosperous, are the poor in spirit. So talking about believers who become yielded to, voluntarily yielded to, surrendered, submissive to the rule of King Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is, emphatic pronoun, theirs is the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God, the same thing. So the chief quality, the chief characteristic of a kingdom subject is humility or poverty of spirit. Now that does not change. So the kingdom doesn't change, number one. The kingdom standards do not change. And number three, the kingdom of God as it functions in the world has never been numerically large. Now this is not to say there have not been and there are not many saved people in the world. I believe that there are many. However, the number of those who accept the rule of King Jesus over their lives is and has always been very small. So the parable of the leaven hid in the mill continues on the same theme as the former parables, circumstances that are adverse to the operation of the kingdom of God in the world. So Matthew chapter 13, verse 33, another parable Jesus spoke to them. Now, he spoke to the multitudes on this occasion, but the teaching particularly concerns his disciples, his kingdom servants. So another parable he spoke to them, another of the same kind. He spoke to them, and he said, the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. So we need to understand Jesus was not comparing the kingdom to leaven. Rather, the teaching, the lesson is to be gained by taking the illustration in its entirety, the whole illustration. A woman hid leaven in 3 measures of meal, and the entire lump was leaven. Of course, we are reminded of those words that a little leaven leavens the whole lump. In the Bible, leaven generally is a symbol of sin and its corrupting influence. Now, leaven is a corrupting agent. It degrades, it deteriorates, and leaven is pervasive. So leaven, yeast, you ladies understand what we're talking about, you bakers. Leaven is pervasive. Once introduced into a batch of dough, you can't get it out. And I think that's a primary detail we need to keep in mind here. So Jesus used leaven as a metaphor for religious error. So if you look at Matthew chapter 16 and verse 6, he warned his disciples, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, you go on down a few verses and the metaphor is dropped, and we learn that the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees was their doctrine. On another occasion, the Lord referred to the leaven of the Pharisees as hypocrisy. So this is Luke chapter 12 and verse 1. So here's the teaching of this parable. The teaching is about the creeping contagion of error that would be and indeed has been introduced into the concept of the Lord's kingdom. Now again, the kingdom and kingdom truth, kingdom standards do not change. But the kingdom as it has come to be viewed by men, and again we're talking about Christendom, includes all kinds of aberrant, conflicting, and unscriptural teachings and practices. So the Lord's churches are not going to clean this up, and neither should they attempt to do so. So just again, going back, the parable of the tares in the field, we have a mixing of the true and the counterfeit in the same field, which represented the world. And both were allowed, the true and the counterfeit were allowed to grow together. And you'll recall that the servants of the field owner were not to try to weed out the counterfeits, lest they do some damage to the true. The mustard seed that exceeded the bounds of its nature and became a tree, again representing Christendom, that has become a haven for all kinds of differing doctrines and religious organizations. A lesson that we gained from that was, okay, you have this big tree and Christendom and all kinds of aberrant teachings, conflicting teachings, take shade or take cover under this tree. A lesson for the Lord's churches, his kingdom servants, don't cut down the tree. Leave it alone. Just continue to do the work that the Lord has given you to do. And then here in the parable of the leaven hid in the mill, we have the introduction of religious error into the kingdom concept, operating under the banner of the kingdom, and the impossibility, once it has come in, the impossibility of eradicating it. Now, let me say that this teaching does not concern what goes on in a Church of Jesus Christ. It does not concern the doctrinal purity that a church is to seek to maintain. This rather is about the Lord's church's responses to Christendom and to the all the varying teachings and things that go on that claim to be, people claim to represent Jesus Christ. So I'll end with this. What I see happening, let me share with you something I see happening in some of the Lord's churches today. Pastors lacking foresight have introduced into their churches forms of music and worship in which are embedded the doctrines of their source. So through music and worship forms enters the leaven of religious error. So what happens, this error, again, it gets in, things get into a church that a pastor may never step up and teach, but things get into leaven, a certain leaven gets into a church that pastors unwise, lacking foresight, they don't foresee it, but it comes in through the music and the worship forms. And so what happens is a creeping contagion comes in that will ultimately lead a church away from strict adherence to the truth and lead a church deeper into error. So what ultimately happens is that those church members who are not willing to embrace the error, they end up having to leave and go somewhere else because things reach a point that they can't, the leaven has infiltrated and you just can't get it out. The leaven can't be purged. So here's the lesson of the leaven hid in the mill, and the next two lessons we'll have on, probably we'll combine the parables of the treasure hid in field and the pearl of great price. So those are really good teachings, and I trust that you'll join me when I put those up. But I do thank you for joining me in this lesson, and I hope that you have some things here that you find helpful. And if you like this teaching, any of these videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So again, thank you for joining me, and the Lord bless you richly, and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.